اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to session 6 of Quran Made Easy. So I'll be talking about a few things today. One is we're going to do our consolidated notes as we've been doing in the last two sessions. We're going to add to that, and then we'll also be taking a look at the lesson 4 handout. So we've already started that, and we still got a few more drills to do in that. So we'll finish that off, and then finally I'll introduce another concept called ending combinations. So we'll start that as well, inshallah. So let's start with the consolidated notes. I've already put something together earlier because by now you should be really comfortable and familiar with this terminology that I have on screen. So let's start with the 3 types of words. You know what an ism is. Let's start with the harf. It's a word that makes no sense unless another word after it. So words like with, to, in, etc., or about. So we've gone over that a number of times. Fi'l is a word that's stuck in a tense. So I've chosen different examples this time to the last 2 sessions. So she began, he fell, he is falling, she is falling, or he is beginning. Any word that's stuck in a tense is a fi'l. And then ism is the broadest category. And I've used different examples again. So I've put asma, that's a person. Office is a place. Person, place, thing. I've put chair, idea. I've put maths because it's like a subject. So any type of subject is an idea. Great is a describing word. So that's an adjective. Slowly is an adverb, and more. So I'm sure you can think of many, many examples. But essentially, ism is a person, place, thing, idea, adjectives, adverbs, and more. And then the 4 components of any ism word is made up of 4. Number 1, status. 2, number. 3, gender. And 4, type. Throughout this month, we'll only really be touching on status and number. We probably won't have time to do gender and type, but it's important that you know that all isms are made up of 4 components. And we've touched on status, and we've briefly talked about number, and the 2 are kind of intertwined. So this is where I'm going to add to today's consolidated notes. So let's start with status. There are 3 types of status we've done: rafa', nasab, and jar. What sound does the rafa' have? First of all, what is the function of rafa'? It is the doer of the sentence. The function of the nasab is the detail of the sentence, and the jar we've defined as after, of. Thereafter, in Arabic, if you want to recognize what the rafa', nasab, and jar are, then you will have to look at the ending sounds. So if I was to summarize the last session in one sentence, it would be as follows. It would be rafa' and number, rafa', nasab, and jar have ending sounds that are un, an, and in, or u, and e. So rafa' is un or u, nasab is an or and jar is in or e. So, and we use an acronym called RUNA-G to help us remember that. U for un or u, for an or e for in or in. And we can call this ending sound es, yeah? And then we looked at example words like Muslim. We came across a chart called the Muslim chart. And that's important to remember, this Muslim chart, because that's like the template word for all the other ism words that you will recognize in the same pattern. So we looked at the word Muslim, and we looked at Muslimun, Musliman, Muslimin, which I'll bring that slide up in a moment. The Muslimun was the rafa because that's the doer of the sentence. Musliman is the detail of the sentence, and the Muslimin is the when it comes after of. And we looked at English translations of where those statuses function. And what I want to say before I flick over to the slides is all of these ending sounds of words are only referring to the singular form. They're only referring to the singular form. Why is that important to remember? Because in the latter part of today's lesson, we're going to look at something called ending combinations. And they consist of more than one, but I'm not going to talk about that right now. So let's go back to this slide. So let's start from here. So this is a refresh or recap of last time. We did this exercise, but we'll do it again just to, because it's been a few days. So let's look at the English sentences here. A Muslim traveled. A Muslim traveled. So the first question is find the action word. It's traveled. And the next question you need to ask yourself is who's doing the traveling? And it seems to be a Muslim. So if therefore a Muslim is the doer of this sentence. And we know a doer is rafa, and the rafa has an ending sound of un or u. So Muslimun traveled, or Muslimu traveled. It has an ending sound, rafa, and it's the doer of the act. The next thing we're going to look at the detail of the act. I saw a Muslim. So this is where the same word, Muslim, is in English, is functioning in a different way. It has a different status to the first example that we saw. In the first example, a Muslim was the doer. In the second example, I saw a Muslim. The word a Muslim is a detail. Why? Because the action word here is saw. Who's doing the seeing? It's I. So I is the doer in this occasion. But we're not going to look at I in Arabic because that's a different rule to what we've learned so far. We're only going to concentrate on a Muslim. So a Muslim in this sentence is a detail, and we know the detail is called nasab, and therefore the nasab has a un sound at the end of the word. Musliman or muslima. It's a nasab in status, and it's the detail of the act. And where we're going to look at the word a Muslim, where it's functioning as a jar status. Jar means after of. So here's an example of that. So religion of a Muslim is Islam. So the word after of is a Muslim on this occasion. So therefore it will have an in sound, Muslimin, or Muslimi, jar, and it's the after of. So I hope that's clear. We went over this in the last lesson. This is just a refresh to remind ourselves. I want you to say this out loud and clearly a couple of times. Muslimun, Musliman, Muslimin. Muslimun, Musliman, Muslimin. It's important that we etch this in our memories. Muslimun, Musliman, Muslimin. Rafa, Nasab, Jar. So this refers to one in number. This is why status, this is where number comes into place now. And all of what we've done so far only refers to the singular form. And we went over this example last time. Qatala Dawudu Jaluta. Dawood killed Jalut. Therefore, Dawood was doing the killing. Jaluta is the detail of the act. We went over this exercise as well. We went over half of it, and then we didn't have time to finish it. What I want to do is briefly go over it again, but I want to introduce a concept called stress testing. So on this occasion, I don't want you to just answer the question. I want you to stress test it in a way to see what it would be if it was the other statuses. So what does that mean? It means if we look at the first word, zinatan, we know the answer is nasab. Why? Because it has a un sound. We look at the where is it? Okay. We look at this here. We know it has an un sound, therefore it's a nasab. What I want you to do is now stress test it and say, okay, if it was a rafa, what would it need to be? What would it need to be? It would need to be zinatun, zinatun. And if it was a jar, what would it need to be? Zinatin. So you're flexing it in a way that you're maximizing what it could have been. And that will only increase our practice and make us better in this exercise. Same with the next one, haditha. Haditha, on this occasion, it has an sound. And we know is a nasab. Let me just write that acronym here so that is easy. Underline that. Rafa is or un, nasab is or un, jar is or in. Now let's look at al-fili. Is it an or e sound? It seems to be an e sound. So we know e is a jar. Now let's flex it. If it was a rafa, what would it need to be? Al-filu. If it was a nasab, what would it need to be? Al-fila. Next one, nasrun. Nasrun. Un sound at the end. Therefore, it's a rafa. Now let's stress test it. So if it was a nasab, what would it need to be? Nasran. And if it was a jar, what would it need to be? Nasrin. And this is where we left it last time. So, well, I think we did naran actually. Naran is an unsound, so therefore that's a nasab. If it needed to be a rafa, what would it need to be? Narun. Narun hamiyah. If it was a jar, what would it be? Narin. Narin. Okay, yawmu. Yawmu is what in status? It has an u sound. Therefore, it is a rafa. And if it was a nasab, what would it sound? Yawma. And if it was jar, what would it need to be? Yawmi. Gaidu means to plot and plan. Gaidu has an u sound. An u is a rafa. And if it was a nasab, what would it need to be? Gaida. And if it was a jar, it would be gaidi. Last one for this drill. Jannatin. Jannatin. What's the ending sound? The ending sound is an in. Therefore, it's a jar. Jar. Jannatin is jar. And if it was a nasab, what would it need to be? Jannatan, because nasab is un or a. And if it was a rafa version, it would be jannatun. Jannatun. So I hope we've gone over enough examples to really solidify that, to really consolidate the fact of rafa, nasab, and jar for each of these words. Here's another exercise. So you can see the table here. We've already defined what the action word is. So the action word is ra'a, and it means saw. So now we know what the action word is. We want to find out who's doing the action and what's the detail of the action. So let's find the doer status of the first phrase, Muhammadun ra'a Khalidan. So we know ra'a means saw, and there's the word Muhammad and there's the word Khalid. So who's doing the seeing and who's got seen? So who's the doer of the action? First question is, the doer means rafa, right? So what sound does rafa have? We know rafa has an un sound or a u sound. So where's the un sound in this phrase? It seemed to be here. Muhammadun. Muhammadun. So Muhammad is is the one doing the act of seeing. And we know ra'a means saw. So Muhammad saw who? Khalid. Khalid. But we're going to say Khalidan because Khalidan is the detail of the act. And we know details are nasab, and nasab has an ending sound of un or a. Yeah? So Muhammad is the doer, Khalid is the detail, and the translation would be Muhammad saw Khalid. Straightforward enough. Now it gets a little bit interesting because on the second example, it says Ra'a Muhammadun Khalidan. Ra'a Muhammadun Khalidan. Imagine if we translated that in the same sequence in English. So Ra'a would be saw. Let's write that down. Muhammadan, I just put an M and a K for Khalid. Now say that in English. Saw Muhammad Khalid. Saw Muhammad Khalid. What does that mean in English? Doesn't mean anything to me. Doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. However, in Arabic, it makes perfect sense because the key thing is to look at the ending sound of the isms. You look at the ending sound of Muhammad and the ending sound of Khalid, and the sentence would make perfect sense. So the Muhammadun is the doer, Khalidan is the detail. So Muhammad saw Khalid. So this has the same meaning as the top example, and it makes perfect sense in Arabic because Muhammadun has the rafa and Khalidan is in nasab status. So that would be translated still as Muhammad saw Khalid. You wouldn't look at it and literally translate it in that same order. You wouldn't say Ra'a Muhammadun Khalidan, saw Muhammad Khalid. It would make no sense. It would make no sense. So that's where the translator has to take a step back and use some common sense as to how you would translate that. And similarly with the third example, Ra'a Khalidan Muhammadun. So what's changed from the third example from the second example to the third example? It seems like the Khalid and Muhammad have switched, but they still got the same status. So Muhammad still has an un sound at the end, and Khalid still has an un sound at the end. Therefore, nothing's really changed in terms of meaning. It would make perfect sense in Arabic. So Muhammad is still the doer because he has an un sound. Khalid is still the detail because it has an un sound, and therefore the translation is still Muhammad saw Khalid, not saw Khalid Muhammad. So that's really interesting. I hope that's beneficial. So what the key takeaway from this is in English, it's the sequence of words that determines the rafa and the nasab, the dua and the detail, whereas in Arabic, it's the ending sounds that determines the detail and the dua, not necessarily the sequence of words. Okay, so I think that's lesson 4 handout finished. We're now going to introduce you to a new concept. So if you go on lesson 5 handout, just share my screen. Okay, so we're going to look at something called pair and dual combinations. So this is to do with the number component, status number, gender, and types. We're on number 2, number, but it's very much linked to status as well. So they're kind of intertwined. And the objective of this lesson is to recognize the ism status with pair and dual ending combinations. So before we had ending sounds, and that is your ru, na, ji, the un, in sound at the end of the ism word. And now we're looking at something called ending combinations, and Runa G doesn't really apply to this ending combinations. Okay, it only applies to ending sounds. So in Arabic, if you wanted to talk about two of something, you would add an ending combinations. One thing to note on this is we're calling ending sounds singular form. So it's one in number. So when you say a Muslim, we're only talking about one Muslim. Muslimun, Musliman, Muslimin. It's one Muslim rafa, one Muslim nasab, one Muslim jar. And now we're talking about duals or pairs. We're talking about two, basically. So let's look at the first example of Muslimani. Circle it. When you say Muslimani, this is rafa. It's rafa in status, and it's two in number. You're talking about two. So in English, you have a singular and you have a plural. But in Arabic, you have a singular, you've got a pair or a dual, we could say, let's call it pair for now, and you have a plural. So you've got three categories: singular, pair, plural. And we haven't touched plural yet. We've only touched singular, and now we're introducing pairs. So Muslimani means two Muslims traveled, and it's the rafa version. Muslimaini is two Muslims also, but it's the nasab version of two Muslims. And Muslimaini again is the jar version of two Muslims. So all of these three are means two Muslims. The top one is the rafa version, the doer of the act. The middle one is the nasab version, the detail of the act. And the third one is the after of jar version, which is after of. So what do we learn here? So we look at the ending combination. What does that even mean? It means that it's not enough to just look at that kasra here for Muslimani. If you do, you would make a big mistake. You would make a big mistake. Why would you make a big mistake? Because if you immediately go to thinking that's ending sound, you would mistake that for a jar. Because you would think, oh, that's an E sound at the end, and Runa G, so jar is an E sound, so therefore that must be jar. But it's not jar, because the ending combination should be ani. Ani, Muslimani. It has an ani ending. So if it has an ani ending, it's rafa in status and it's two in number. So Muslimani means two Muslims, rafa version. Muslimun is one Muslim, rafa version. Very important to know. So this is the ending combination here. Ani at the ending. Ani. Aini. Muslimaini. Muslimaini. That's the nasab version of two Muslims. So the observation here, it has an aini ending. Aini. And the jar is the same. Aini ending. So what are the observations we can notice from here? Number one, not enough to look at ending sound of isms. So it's not, like I said, it's not enough to just look at that kasra there for Muslimani and say, oh, okay, that's jar. It's not. You have to look out for the ending combination first. So that's the next tip. Always look for ending combination. I'll call that EC first. That's the first tip. So if you're looking at an ism, okay, how do we work out this is a singular or a pair or a plural? Plural you haven't touched yet, so that's fine. The way to do it is firstly look at if it's an ending combination. And then if it's not, then by process of elimination, then it must be an ending sound. Because if you look at the ending sound first and then jump to conclusions, you'll think Muslimani is jar because you'll see the kasra. You'll think Muslimaini is jar. But where it could be a nasab. And Muslimaini is also can be jar anyway. And the third thing you'll notice is that the nasab and jar versions are the same. So muslimaini is the same, whereas in the singular ending sounds version, they're different. It's muslimun is rafa, musliman is nasab, and muslimin is jar. But for the pair version, the rafa is distinct, muslimani, but the nasab and jar versions are exactly the same, muslimaini. So a question comes to mind: how do you know when to differentiate between, or how to differentiate between nasab and jar in the pair version? Well, that only comes about due to context and common sense of the sentence. So that's more advanced stuff. But right now, you just need to know muslimaini and muslimaini are nasab and jar. So this is what we need to get in our minds, that a singular has an ending sound and a dual has an ending combination. What are the ending sounds of the singular? Un, an, in, muslimun, musliman, muslimin. And what are the ending combination of the pair version? Muslimani, muslimaini, muslimaini. So now I want you to say together twice both the ending sound and the pair version of the Muslim chart. The reason why we say the Muslim chart is because Muslim is now going to be a template word for any of these type of rules that we're learning. And if we can master the Muslim chart, that means you can substitute it with other words and then apply the same concept. I can say something like kitabun, and you can think of kitabun. I can say to you, give me the rafa' nasab version of the singular and pair, and then you can say, oh right, it's kitabun, kitaban, kitabin, and the pair version, kitabani, kitabaini, kitabaini. So let's master the Muslim chart first, and then it will be easy to apply to other words to it. So I want you to say twice the singular and the pair version. So muslimun, musliman, muslimin. Say it together. Muslimun, musliman, muslimin. Muslimani, muslimaini, muslimaini. Muslimun, musliman, muslimin. Muslimani, muslimaini, muslimaini. These are the rafa, nasab, and jar versions of the singular ending sounds and the pair ending combinations. So now let's go back. Let's wrap this up by going back to our consolidated notes, and let's just add to it. So this is what I've been saying here. Ending sound is your singular. Runaji is your singular form. And now what we're saying is ending combination is made up of pair and plural. And we're not talking about plural just yet, so we're only talking about pair. And what are the endings, rafa, nasab, jar sounds for that? Rafa is ani, nasab is aini, and jar is aini. So you've got un, an, in, or u, e for ending sound, and then for the ending combination pair, you've got ani, aini, aini. And now I'm going to write the Muslim chart, and by that you should know what I mean. So whenever I say Muslim chart, you should be able to really just say off the back of your hand, Muslimun, Musliman, Muslimin, Muslimani, Muslimaini, Muslimaini. So I want you to practice that until next time. So by Thursday, you should be really comfortable saying that chart. Muslimun, Musliman, Muslimin. That's one Muslim rafa, one Muslim nasab, one Muslim jar. Muslimani, Muslimaini, Muslimaini. Two Muslims rafa, two Muslims nasab, two Muslims jar. What are the function of rafa, nasab, jar? Rafa is the doer of the act. So Muslimani, you can say two Muslims traveled. Muslimaini, I saw two Muslims traveling. And Muslimaini is the jar version. So that's an after of, you can think of a sentence of that. So I hope that's clear. I want to end on one note. Let's share my screen. This is an ayah from the Quran, Surah Rahman. وَلِمَنْ خَافَ مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ جَنَّتَانِ. Whoever, sorry, one sec. And so whoever fears standing his Lord, so in other words, standing before his Lord, before his Rabb. Question, how many Jannahs does that person get? Let's do the Muslim chart. Muslimun, Musliman, Muslimin, that's one. Muslim, Rafa Nasab Jar. Muslimani, Muslimaini, Muslimaini, that's the pair version. So let's apply it. Jannatun, Jannatan, Jannatin. That's one Jannah, Rafa Nasab Jar. And now we're doing the pair. Jannah, Dani. So how many Jannahs? Whoever fears standing before his Rabb, they will get 2 Jannahs. SubhanAllah. بارك الله لي ولكم في القرآن الحكيم ونفعني وإياكم بالآيات والذكر الحكيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.